right. Our meeting begins with a recollection of our relation to the universal being and our purpose here. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the divine being, may the divine being, may we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Thank you, Clarice.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. And again, I want to thank each one of you for your continued interest in what I think is one of the most important pieces of work to come out of the 20th century. I am delighted to see you. And I thought we might start off by asking, do you have any questions or observations or comments that you want to make about what we discussed last time we together? And as you consider that, does everyone have the printed materials?
Yes. That's what we're working on.
Okay, great.
Do you have one?
Okay. It's page 7. Page 7.
Yes, we'll start on page 7, or I thought we went over, but we can talk about page 7 again if you'd like.
No, I have a question about.
Oh, okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, it says that it sounds like feelings but are not feelings. But my question is, if I feel put down, isn't that a feeling that I feel rejected? I feel humiliated when I say I'm put down.
So put down, Uma, is an interpretation or a judgment. If I hold the thought that someone is putting me down, I'm going to have feelings around that. Put down isn't itself a feeling, it's an interpretation. So if I tell myself or hold the thought I've just been put down, I might feel sad, I might feel hurt, I might feel angry.
Yes.
So those are feelings. Put down itself is not. And that's an important distinction to make, because if I'm not connecting to my feelings, but staying connected to my head instead and the interpretations I make, then I'm not really connecting fully to myself. I'm not giving myself the experience to feel hurt if I'm holding the thought that I've just been put down. Does that make sense, Uma?
It's a tiny little.
It is. It's small and also very significant at the same time. Because if I say I feel rejected, or I feel abandoned, or I feel bullied, none of those are feelings, and they keep me disconnected or separated from my feelings.
But if I say I feel hurt.
Hurt is a feeling.
Yes. For the way you are treating me, I feel hurt. The way you are speaking with me, I feel hurt. So that's how I connect.
Yes, so the feeling hurt is useful because it tells me I have an unmet need. And so what might my unmet need be if I'm telling myself that I feel that I've been put down? I might have a need, for example, to be heard. I might have a need to be understood. I might have a need to be appreciated. I might have a need for consideration. So you see, these are subtle distinctions, but very important distinctions, because they will determine whether or not I feel my feelings and acknowledge my needs. And that's what the work is about, having that clarity that subtlety, that discernment between a word that's a feeling, a word that's a need, and a strategy. Because many of us have been trained and educated and enculturated to not speak our feelings, to not speak our needs. And so we keep ourselves separate from really very important, vital information.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or observations about what we discussed the last time we were together? About feelings or needs?
Can we confront with them and say, hey, I don't appreciate your comments? If
Well-
that makes us hurt.
Well, let me ask you this. If I said to you, I don't appreciate your comments, does that invite someone to hear me in the way I want to be heard? So let me do this. This might be fun. Let me get a piece of paper here. And I'm going to write down, oh, Elizabeth, would you be willing to share the screen?
What I can do is allow you to share the screen, I think.
Oh, okay, yes, and then I'll share it.
Yeah. Okay, you can share now.
Perfect, thank you. All right. So I'm going to see if I can write in big letters so that everyone can see this. I'll try to. Okay, so did I hear it correctly? I don't appreciate, what was the rest of that?
Your comments.
I don't appreciate your comment. So let's take a look at this. I don't appreciate your comment. Am I stating my feelings?
Well, to some extent, yes.
And how am I stating them? In a negative way
In a-
or a positive?
No, in a very courteous way.
Well, when I say I don't appreciate your comment, to me, that's not nearly as effective as saying, when I heard you say whatever it was, I felt hurt because I have a need to be understood. What is the difference between this and this?
Second one is more direct, I think.
I didn't quite understand that. The second
First
one
one is diplomatic.
is more,
No, he said the second one is more direct.
so it is direct. And notice that I am sharing how I feel and I am sharing what I need in a way that doesn't make someone wrong. It doesn't make them bad. I am simply explaining and sharing my experience of how I heard their comment. And I'm also being very vulnerable, aren't I? And it is the vulnerability that can open hearts. When I show up vulnerable, I increase my chances not only for being heard in the way I want to be heard, but for keeping connected to the compassion in me and inviting someone else to get connected to the compassion in them.
Thank you.
Does that make sense? Is that helpful to see that distinction?
Yeah, I see the distinction, but I'm still not able to, you know. Yeah, I see the distinction, yes.
Okay. Now, this also is general information. I don't appreciate your comment. That says, if I heard someone say that to me, that might risk my perceiving this as an attack and then invite my defenses to come up. And then I risk not hearing what's important to you if you, for example, had said to me, I don't appreciate your comment.
But isn't that when you say, I have a need to be understood, it is the ego he's talking about.
Well, it is the need. And so what I would do, the fourth piece, remember there are 4 components. The first is sharing observations without evaluation. So I would simply say what I heard you say and repeat the comment. The second is sharing my feelings. In this case, I felt hurt. The third is to share my needs, in this case, the need to be understood. And then the last one is the specific request, which begins with these 5 magic words, as I like to think of them. Would you be willing to? Because when I preface any kind of request with the words, would you be willing to, I'm inviting choice. Would you be willing? And I risk their hearing it as a demand. So I could do a number of things. Would you be willing to tell me what you just heard me say? And in that way, I can get clear, how did he hear me? Or how did she hear me? Or would you be willing to tell me how you feel about what I've just said? That would be another strategy. You see, there are far more strategies than there are needs. And the point of these kinds of strategies is to make connection. We're not trying to have the whole conversation in these 2 sentences. We're beginning the conversation. Yes, Uma?
Yes, choice of words, very important. But
Yes,
at the same time, tone in which you are speaking, that can be offensive too.
yes. And so if I am congruent, if I am genuinely and sincerely interested in keeping a connection and sharing how I feel and what my needs are, then I increase my chances for being heard in the way I want to be heard. If I try to use this approach to manipulate someone, it will not work. This works, this language of compassion works when I show up sincerely and genuinely.
Right. But
And
what I,
there's an energy to that, and we can feel the energy, or Uma, as you phrased it, the tone of voice.
Mm.
And Gita, I'm aware you had a hand, just caught you with a mouthful, didn't I, Gita? Did you have a comment you wanted to
I
make?
think it was addressed when I also felt it was general blaming. I don't appreciate.
Okay.
The other one was more like connecting with yourself instead of saying what the other person did.
Yes, that's beautifully stated. And notice how specific it is too. I name a specific feeling, in this context, hurt. I name a specific need, in this context, to be understood. And I also name a specific strategy. How do you feel about what I've just said?
but the question that I have still remains, doesn't it matter? Or is it not as important to take care of your tone in which you are telling? For
Yes,
example,
yes, you want to speak in a tone that is sincere.
yeah, that's not a threatening or
Yeah.
insulting.
I agree completely. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, great. And are there any other questions or comments about this? Okay, I'm going to stop the share. And what you may have guessed by now is it takes time to really consider, well, what do I feel about this comment? What are my needs? And that's the hardest part of this work, perhaps, is to stop and slow down. Because I suspect every single one of us in this Zoom room has a very fast mind. We can come back like that. And this work invites that I do the opposite, that I slow down and really connect, as Gita said, first with what's alive in me, and then be willing to share it with someone else. And to the extent I do that, then I can keep the connection with what's best in me and keep the connection with the other. And together we both explore, because you know what? The person who makes some kind of comment for which I felt hurt is attempting to meet his or her need. because Marshall believed that all behavior is in the service of needs. So if I were to say to you, you know what, you're an idiot and a moron, I am attempting to meet my need. The problem, though, with my saying you're an idiot and a moron, as Marshall saw it, is that that's a tragic expression of an unmet need. Tragic because it's so hard to see what the need is underneath the words, you're an idiot and a moron. But if I can hold in mind that this person is attempting to meet their need, then I can get curious, well, what is their need? And that's the key question. What is their need? What is their need? What is their need? And then the beauty of it, for the materials that you have, you don't have to go to the website or a dictionary or call a friend, because on page 4, you've got a list of needs. And you can go down the list one at a time. Because maybe the person who says you're an idiot and a moron feels frustrated and has a need to be heard. Isn't that interesting? And if I understood that, then it makes it easier for me to relate to that person. They're not a bad person. They're not a wrong person. They're simply speaking in ways that don't serve them well. And I can help them by that, by guessing what their need is. I can't know what their need is, but I can guess it. The only person I can know whose needs are me. I can always know what I feel and what I need in any given time. But I can only guess. But it's useful to guess, because then you see the guessing invites someone to get curious, well, how do I feel? What is my need? And help them with this language. I mean, it is astonishing, isn't it, how meaningful words can be. So, with that said, are there any questions? So we've covered observation without evaluation. We've covered needs. We've covered feelings, and we've covered strategies. Any questions about any of those? Okay, then let's do this. I want to share the screen once more. And I want to share with you, let me get this. I'm going to share this. So the question is, how do we shift from judgment to compassion? And you've seen a little bit already how that works. Well, let's start off with this judgment. You never take me out to dinner. Remember, that was part of the life alienating dialogue that we had before. The woman says to the man, you never take me out to dinner. All right, so we're going to see about taking this statement, you never take me out to dinner, and shift it from judgment to compassion. So one of the first ways we want to do that is to connect to these 4 components. Observation. What do I observe specific to time and context? Feelings. What do I feel about my observation? Needs. What do I need? And request. What is my strategy specific to time and behavior? And then when I have that information, I want to shape it by using these 4 sentence stems. So when I begin to share my observation without evaluation, I do so by saying, when I see or when I hear. Because that's now my sharing what's alive in me and my experience. Without saying, well, when you, I say instead, when I see or what I hear. And then I'm going to share my feelings around that simply by stating, I feel, and then name the feeling. And then I'm going to share my need simply by saying, because I need, and then name the need. And then I'm going to make the specific request by prefacing that request, would you be willing to and then name that request specific to time and behavior. So if we start off with, you never take me to dinner, that is embedded with criticism and judgment and condemnation, we're going to shift it to the language of compassion. And this is just one example of what that can look like. So this would be the compassionate way of saying what's alive in us. When I realized that 90% of our conversation during last night's dinner was about work, I felt disheartened because I have a need for connection with you. Would you be willing to share your feelings about what I've just said? So notice this part right here, when I realized that 90% of our conversation during last night's dinner was about work, that's the observation without evaluation. That's how I'm going to provide someone a context for what this particular conversation is about. And once I've done that, I'm going to share right away my feelings. In this case, I felt disheartened. And then right away, I'm going to share my need. In this case, because I have a need for connection with you. And then the last piece is the request. Would you be willing to share your feelings about what I've just said? So this is the compassionate way of expressing what is alive in me, as opposed to the judgmental way of expressing what is alive in me. Which one do you think is more effective? And when there's silence in the room, I can't know what your thoughts are.
Well, I don't think that 90% of that about what, because we dispute about you are not taken to the dinner and all. So how 90% will be about what? What is a component, a part of it?
Well,
But
so
why we are
notice,
saying here 90% about what?
well, it's going to be about, she's talking about the conversation they have, and that her experience of it was that 90% of the conversation was about work, but what she has is a need for connection. So what she's sharing with him is what? What is she sharing with him?
So what I'm feeling, maybe it's a perception, my perception that I'm thinking 90% that we discussed yesterday night about what, even if it is not. So that I'm coming from that perception so that it will be more conversational, not confrontational, that way I'm approaching it.
So do I understand that you hear this as being confrontational? Is that what, I'm not sure I understand. I have a need to know. Would you be willing to clarify?
No, what I'm saying that whatever we discussed last night that you are not taking me to the dinner, but that is the main context. But here we are saying 90%
I
is
see.
about my work.
Yes.
So I'm converting that you are not taking me to dinner, the main topic, to my work. That's the way I'm becoming more diplomatic or whatever you call it. Yeah. Is that a turn I'm doing, or what is the intention here? Because my
Well-
intention may be make it more friendly, make it more friendly conversation. That's the reason I'm just taking it out. Didn't take me to dinner, and you are. I'm telling, hey, we discussed more about what. 90% we discussed about what.
Well,
That's the intention.
Well, as I understand it, and maybe I'm still not hearing you accurately, for her, 90% of the conversation was about work. Now, here's an interesting thing. Notice how you never take me out to dinner. That statement never addresses what's real for her.
Right.
Doesn't really address what her feelings are, and it doesn't really address what her needs are. So he's either left with one of two choices. One, to become angry or to perceive attack and then defend, or he can guess what her needs are. But most people don't have the list of needs. They don't know a need. So what she is saying here, and again, this is just one example, by no means the only example, what she really means underneath, you never take me out to dinner, is that she has a need for connection. Let me try this again. She has a need for connection. But you see, that need for connection never gets stated explicitly in this judgment, you never take me out to dinner. Does that make sense? Does that address what you're saying or what you're asking?
Yeah, kind of, yeah, it is going towards that, yes, I agree.
So what she's doing before she shares her need for connection is to give him a context, which is what this piece is about. In other words, we're not going to talk about the high cost of groceries right now. We're not going to talk about the excitement that we have that our child is going to have a child. You know, we're talking about the dinner, last night's dinner. And the fact that 90% of the conversation at last night's dinner was about work. This is the context she gives him so that he understands what the nature of the conversation will be as they continue to discuss it. Is that answering your
Yeah,
question?
yeah, that is, I think, yeah,
Okay.
broader sense, yes.
Okay, great. So my hope is, and I'd be curious to know for others of you, do you feel a difference between this statement, the language of compassion, and this one, you never take me out to dinner?
Yes, definitely, because, the fourth one is actually, the need is not really even for the dinner. It is only an expression of anger to some extent.
Yes, that's a very astute observation. And she's never even really clear that she doesn't even say, I feel angry, does she? You can feel the anger, but she doesn't claim it. And I'll tell you something interesting about that. Scientific research has been done to show that when I acknowledge a feeling, if I say out loud, I feel angry, I begin to soothe my mind. Now, isn't that remarkable? The very act of saying out loud, I feel angry, begins to soothe my mind and to diminish the intensity of the feeling of anger I have. And while they haven't yet done the research on needs, on expressing needs, I suspect the following would be true. Because in my own case, if I'm angry, and if I say, I feel angry, I have a need for support, the act of saying that helps me to diminish my own intensity of energy. Because the very act of saying it out loud means I am connected to my feeling, I am connected to my need, and so the energy begins to lower. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And isn't that remarkable? Because we can do that. We can do that. That is us empowering ourselves. Because in any given moment, I can know what I feel and I can know what I need. And if I'm unsure or unclear, I've got the list of feelings and the list of needs right here, page 4, 5, and 6. And I can go to this and just go down one word at a time. And sometimes it's interesting. I might think I feel angry, and in fact I do. But if I explore it more deeply, I might also discover I feel sad. You see? And that was one of the things that Marshall noted. The beauty of anger is that it indicates an unmet need. That's the beauty of anger. That anger isn't a wrong feeling or a bad feeling, nor is sadness a wrong feeling or a bad feeling. None of those feelings are bad. They are pieces of information about how well I'm meeting my need in any given moment. So if I feel frustrated, well, what's the need? If I feel upset, what's the need? If I feel worn out, what's the need? You see, rather than stew in this unacknowledged anger, and sit in that for hours, days, weeks, months, years at a time. Get curious instead. Well, what is my need? And as I begin to connect that, then I go, oh, I have a need to be seen. Well, what does that look like for me? What is it that I want the person to see? Or if I have a need to be understood, what does that look like? What is it that I want them to understand? And make it specific, because unfortunately, many are adept at speaking in general terms. And I'll give you an example. This is a lovely, fun example. Years ago, a friend of mine was at work and told his supervisor that he would have his report done at the end of day. Now that would appear to be clear, wouldn't it? Except that to my friend's way of thinking, the end of day was midnight. But his supervisor's way of thinking, the end of day is at 5 p.m. So when my friend doesn't get the report in at 5 p.m., you can see the confusion that his supervisor will have, right? I thought you said end of day. And he goes, yes, I did say end of day. And you see how vague and general that is. Because each one has their own idea about what end of day means. Their ideas are different. So to say, I will deliver the report to you 5 p.m., March the 18th. That's really clear and specific. And when we can be clear and specific like that, we reduce misunderstandings. So imagine with something as simple as end of day, the other many ways that we can create confusion because we're not specific. So that's why these lists of needs and feelings are so helpful, because they are so specific. They name a specific feeling. They name a specific need. That's part of the beauty of this work. And when I can share what's alive in me in a way that isn't making you wrong, but wanting you to know what's going on, that's a game changer. That is a game changer. And as one who has experienced that kind of miscommunication with my partner, it took us years to be able to find this language. And when we used it, we realized we had less and less anger between us because we were more and more specific and more clear. When someone says, I'm frustrated, I have a need to be heard, I can understand that because it's so clear and specific. Uma, you have a question or a
Yes,
comment?
yes, I perfectly understand that when something to blame somebody comes out of your mouth, it's your own unsatisfied need. That I understand. What if, my question, what if there is a clash between the needs of one person is the other person?
Thank you so much, Uma. I so appreciate that question, because here's something that may surprise you and everyone else. Marshall believed there is no conflict in needs. So you might want to write that down. No conflict in needs. There is, however, conflict in strategies. So let me give you an example. Let's say I feel tired and I have a need for rest. And let's say you feel excited and you have a need for play. Well, there's no conflict in the needs. What we will do, to the extent that we're willing to share them with one another, is devise strategies that meet everyone's needs. So if I'm tired and have a need for rest, I might take a 20-minute power nap. And then at the end of that, since you're excited and have a need for play, we'll go out for a walk. Do you
Sorry. What if one says, let's go out this evening, and the other one says, no, I want to stay home.
So I want to stop
Oh,
you
yes.
right, Uma, hang on, I want to stop you right there. Did any of you notice what Uma just did? Do you notice what it was that she focused on?
The
And
strategy.
yes, I so appreciate, Uma, you're bringing this in because this is what we do. Uma brought in strategies. She named them as needs, but naming them as needs doesn't make them needs. Do you see? They're strategies. And that's part of the work. One way to think about it, needs answer the question, what? Strategies answer the question, how? I have a need for play. How do I get that need met? What is the action? You see? So strategies are always about actions. Needs are not. And so the work really takes time and effort to begin to make the discernment, the distinctions between feelings and needs and strategies, because so often we'll say, well, I need you to go to the store. Well, I didn't name a need. I need you to help me with my homework. I didn't name a need. You see? And similarly, I feel that you're unfair. I didn't name a feeling. I feel as if everything is so hard. I didn't name a feeling. Do you see? So that's what this work invites us to do, to move out of the very narrow constriction that we have been trained and educated to speak in, and to make it wider. And it's a paradox, isn't it? Because as we make it wider by naming our feelings and our needs and our strategies, we're making it more specific and precise. And it's the specific, precise language that is so empowering to everyone because of the clarity it offers.
Clarice?
Yes.
Yeah, just for practice, I'm going to rephrase this. I need help with my homework.
Okay.
Rather than that, what if we said, I am frustrated because I have a need to understand this subject. Would you be willing to help me with my homework?
And now our work is done. That's beautifully said. Did you see? I feel frustrated, naming the feeling of frustrated because I have a need to understand, you see, and then the strategy comes. Would you be willing to help me with my homework? And the beauty of that is that we're really keeping the cart behind the horse, because when we name the strategy first and speak only strategies, we're not addressing the needs or the feelings, are we? That's like putting the cart in front of the horse. It's going to be hard for the horse to move. But if we can name the feelings and needs first, then that's putting the cart behind the horse. It would be, I don't know if this is a helpful analogy or not, it's one that's coming to mind immediately, but it's as if I were a doctor and someone brings a patient in and I go, oh, well, let me give you a shot of penicillin. Without ever getting curious, what is the person's needs? Do you see what I'm saying? So it's similar to that. Get clear, what are the feelings and needs first, then devise the strategy. Because when we have clarity about the needs, the strategies will arise organically from the expressed needs. This is an interesting work example from someone else. I don't know if I shared this before. If I did, just stop me. I'm not interested in repeating myself. But the group of people were working on a project, and one of the members of the group just kept looking at his phone and not really participating in the project, and my friend found himself feeling really very agitated. You know, like he wanted to say to him, get off the phone and pay attention. But he knew this work really well. And so when they took a break, he went to him and said, you know, I'm curious to know. That's a beautiful, pithy phrase for expressing feelings and need. I'm curious, because curious is a feeling, to know, because to know was a need. He said, I'm curious to know what was important to you on the phone. And he said it in a way that was compassionate. And do you know what this man said? He said, I feel ashamed. He said, I think I may be too old for this work. I don't know if I can keep up. Now that is someone showing up very vulnerably. And that's the kind of conversation that opens hearts, not closes them. And he learned something that in his wildest imagination, he would never have imagined was alive in this man. Does that make sense? And so if he had said to him instead, what are you doing on the phone? Get off the phone. I don't know that this man would have been willing to have shared what was genuinely alive in him. So we never really know what someone else is thinking or feeling or needing. We can guess, but we don't ever really know. And then doesn't that open the dialogue to a really heartfelt conversation so that they can begin to meet the needs of everyone? Because this work is about meeting the needs of everyone, not just one or two or three or many or most. It's everyone. So any other comments or questions? Yes.
So in the example you just gave, the word curious becomes so a critical piece. So instead of saying, I'm curious to know what was important in your phone, if you said, I want to know what was so important in your phone, again, it becomes accusatory, or it doesn't give that compassion if you don't add the word curious.
Yes. And to know, feelings are 10% of our connection to ourselves. Needs are 90%. That's 90. So needs are a big piece of information. I'm curious to know. Any other comments, questions, or observations?
Is this based on statistics that you are saying 10% is feelings is 10% and need is 90%? Is that based on any scientific statistics?
No, that's how
the perception.
That's how Marshall saw it.
Or the muscle.
Marshall Rosenberg, who developed language of compassion.
Okay.
He saw feelings as 10% and needs as 90%. Because for many of us, this was true of my own experience. I don't know if it's been true of yours or not. When I became acquainted with feelings and began to name them to myself and to others, that was very helpful, but it didn't seem complete to me. It wasn't enough to say, well, I feel angry or I feel unsettled. And needs was, for me, the missing piece, because feelings and needs are so deeply connected. It's not like we have feelings over here and needs over here. They're very deeply connected. And that's why feelings are so useful. If I feel happy, then chances are needs are met in the moment. If I feel joy, chances are needs are met in the moment. If I feel upset, chances are needs are not met. What is my need? If I feel lonely, what is my need? If I feel anguish, what is my need? So the two work beautifully together in a partnership. And so that's why feelings can be seen as pieces of information. They help me know how well am I meeting my needs. And if I feel sad in the moment, it doesn't mean I'll feel sad the rest of my life. It's just in that moment, because in that moment, I have an unmet need. Any other questions or comments before we move into empathy.
Oh,
Yeah.
Can Raj speak?
go ahead.
Raj, you
Okay.
might need to
Okay,
go up
so
closer.
what I was making observation, and since I have a low business around, so seems to be what we apply in the interpersonal relationship seems to be very much application when you're dealing with the customers. Because if you can identify customers' need, what customer is asking for, then you are much more able to serve the customer. And seems to be interesting now. I see that trend in a lot of businesses because they always ask you to fill out the survey or respond to survey questions. And some businesses are like when they say, put a comment, that they give you space to put a comment at the end, and some don't. Now that's kind of interesting. The one who doesn't allow you to put any kind of comments or expressions seems to be, are they really listening to me or not?
Yeah, that's a very astute observation because this work is easily applied and readily applied to business. It's not just to personal relationships, although it certainly applies there. It applies to business as well. And isn't that interesting? Because a survey is nothing more than a strategy. And the strategy is to meet the company's need to know. I mean, wouldn't that really be interesting and fascinating if companies were genuinely interested in the needs of their clients? And then, you know, as you develop strategies for clients, developing those kinds of strategies that meet their needs would be remarkable work for everyone. Right? For the company creating the strategies for meeting needs, that gives them purpose and meaning. It meets their needs for purpose and meaning and contributing to the well-being of others. So yes, that's a very astute observation. If I were genuinely interested in knowing what others' needs are, what my customers' needs are, then that would help me understand the strategies for meeting those needs. Uma, you had a question?
Yes, I perfectly understand and appreciate what you're saying. But to me, it seems like too polite and thoughtful and courteous, but in real life, let me give an example.
Well, Uma, I think I know where you're going. And here's something I want to say. I was going to wait for the end of our time together to say it, but I'll say it to you now because I'm aware of our time and I'm beginning to feel anxious. I have a need to support the group in covering more material, but let me address your thought with this. Margaret Atwood, the famed novelist who wrote The Handmaid's Tale, was quoted in the Air Force Times of all publications in 2022 as saying this: "War is what happens when language fails."
Oh.
And I'll say that again. War is what happens when language fails. And that war can be between nations, it can be between countries, it can be between groups, it can be between family members and friends, it can be even within myself. So we are accustomed to speaking in ways that are thoughtless and unkind. And my question to you is, how's that going for everybody? Are we happy? So to take the time to really consider with thought feelings and needs would increase the chances for peace, not war. And with that said, I want to introduce you to empathy because this is a very different use of feelings and needs. And what I'd like you to do, if you've got your printed materials, is to turn to page 12 in your printed materials. And on page 12, you will see examples of non-empathic responses. And I thought it might be interesting for us to have a discussion of what empathy is by looking first at what empathy isn't. So this is on page 12, examples of non-empathic responses. And as you look at the variety of non-empathic responses, I'm curious to know, do you see yourself in any of these responses? Do you have favorites that you use?
I see myself in the phrase, everything's going to be okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah. See, that's useful information, isn't it? To know that that's what you would tend to say.
But I'm not so sure that that's non-empathic. Because sometimes when people are just really down and defeated,
Uh-huh.
they feel like they can't go on. To say everything's going to be okay is accurate information, which could encourage them to move forward in life in a positive way.
Well, here's the interesting thing. If someone is generally feeling down and out and they're in distress, what would be helpful to them is to receive empathy. That is to be heard. And before we go there, I want to know, do anyone else see yourself? Do you see yourself as consoling as well, or do you see yourself in other ways?
I absolutely see myself in commiserating.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And it's really funny. I just also want to say very quickly that I've adopted this handout in my day-to-day life in the past few weeks, and it has been transformative. It's helped me use other tools in better ways as well. So yesterday I met with a friend and I lapsed into commiseration first. Her son is autistic. And so he had a meltdown yesterday and she was trying to tell me about that meltdown. And what I reflexively did was say, oh, that's awful. I'm so sorry. And then after a minute, I took myself to a place of, I want to be more empathetic. And I invited her to talk about the experience. I asked her about her feelings, and I didn't guess her needs so much. I think her need was to have somebody just listen and to, receive that experience with her without trying to evaluate or fix it and like do something with it. And I felt a real change in the energy between us, and it was really remarkable and it felt good.
Rather than say it felt good, did you feel happy?
I felt happy. I felt connection. I felt exhilaration.
Oh, wonderful. And as I hear you say you felt happy and exhilaration, I felt closer to you as a result of that, rather than when you said you felt good. And that's the beauty of this language. We do deepen our connection. I thank you very much for bringing that in. What I want to share is that these examples are not necessarily wrong. It's that they're not empathy. And that's the point that I want to make. So I don't want you to think, well, I've been doing the wrong thing or the bad thing. It's just, it's not empathy. And when people are in distress, they often have a need, catch that word, a need for empathy. So let's do this. Would you be willing to flip back to page 11? And you'll see in the middle of that page a paragraph that begins with the words, when we are thinking. So who would be willing to read aloud that paragraph in the middle of the page? Okay, thank you.
When we are thinking about people's words, listening to how they connect to our theories, we are looking at people. We are not with them. The key ingredient of empathy is presence. We are wholly present to the other party and what they are experiencing.
Thank you. So the thing to remember about empathy is, just as was read, we are offering a safe presence for someone to explore what's alive in them. And as what was just shared in that beautiful example with the woman with the autistic son, when we do that, when we create or hold a safe presence for someone to explore what's alive in them, they then have the opportunity to connect to their feelings and needs. Because the moment I say, well, gosh, that's really too bad, or, well, have you read this book? I've now made it about me and not about them. And it's in this moment when they're in distress, it's important to be about them. And it might be that we would guess because we can't know. And perhaps in this case, the mother was feeling frustrated. We could guess that. Are you feeling frustrated? And maybe she had a need for ease. We could guess that. Do you have a need for ease? So that's what the words sound like when we offer empathy, but mostly empathy looks and sounds like this. Which is to say, we hold a quiet, safe presence for someone to explore what's alive in them. And if they get too much in their heads and not connected to their feelings, then we come in and we guess, are you feeling? And we guess the specific feeling. Wait till they've connected, and then we guess, so do you have a need? And then guess the specific need. And when they feel connected, one of two things will happen. One is this. They get quiet because they're beginning to connect with what's alive in them in the moment. The other thing that happens is this. They literally let out a sigh as if their body is releasing all of that emotional tension they have been holding. And these are rich, fertile times because there may be more for them to explore. Do you see? And if we have a brilliant idea that comes up and we want to share it with them, we hold it until we're clear that the empathy is over. Because if I have had, when someone offers me empathy in an aha moment, I want to be present to that moment. I don't want to be distracted by someone else's thought. I want to be present to myself and the experience I just had. And so what I might say is, I had a thought come to mind. Is now a good time to share it? And if they say no, then I understand they want to be with what they just discovered. And I can easily support that. And then we might say, well, let me know when you'd like to know and I'll tell you. Because often when people receive empathy, they will discover for themselves what the strategies are. That they can't see it in that moment is because they're sort of held hostage, so to speak, by the amygdala, or what used to be called the reptilian part of their brain. But when they begin to connect to their feelings and needs, they begin to shift from the amygdala to the neofrontal cortex, which is where decisions are made. So, in the time we have left, I want to give you the opportunity to offer me empathy. And I want you to do two things. One, I want you to guess what you think my feelings and needs are. No, you don't have to be worried about guessing them accurately because you can't know. You can only guess. But your guessing will help lead me to what they are. And then the other thing is, what was the experience for you as you listened and as you offered me empathy? Was it difficult? Was it easy? Are you ready? Okay, here we go. So I imagine most of you are very much aware of I-85, which in Atlanta is Murder Road. People who get on 85 are idiots and morons. They do not know how to read numbers. 55 has no meaning for them whatsoever. No one even would dare go 55 and I-85 because you know what? 55 is way too slow. You're going to go at least 75, maybe even 110, maybe 250 if you can, right? So I'm on this road taking my very life in my hands when all of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere comes a car that missed me this much, just this much. I slam on my brakes, smoke is all around me. I literally cannot see out the window of my car because of all the smoke. And I'm grabbing onto my steering wheels. I'm saying, please, God, do not let someone hit me because can they see me in all the smoke? Finally, when the smoke clears, and I'm going to tell you I did not get hit, I see that car move 3 lanes over, boom, hightail it down the road. So I'm gonna stop for there. What would you guess my feelings were, and what would you guess my needs were? And again, it's just a guess because you can't know, but what would you guess?
You were feeling angry because you had a need to be safe.
Yes, that was true. I did feel angry. And if you had offered me empathy, you would have said, well, were you feeling angry? Did you have a need for safety? Yes. Anything else you think I might have felt or needed?
Might have felt scared, or anxious.
Yes. And what would my need be connected to my fear or scared or anxious?
The needs are on, she's asking you what your needs are, and the needs are on the
Oh,
page. Yeah.
First, to not get hurt.
Well, do you
Or
see
look at
to
it.
not get hurt on the needs list?
Something to help you, your anxiety kind of go down a little bit, something reassuring or.
So if you take a look on page 4, what need do you think, and others can help her, what need do you think would be connected to the feeling of fear or anxiety?
Safety.
Safety could, yes, it could still be the same need, safety. Is there another need, other needs that you think would be related to the feelings?
Consideration,
I'm sorry, what?
consideration.
Yes, consideration. Yes.
I'm not sure if this is a need, but the idea of revenge.
So let me ask you this. How can you be sure that's a need?
What will defend you to do when she has gone to that?
Well, there's a need for revenge, although you'll never get it.
Well, do you see the need, the word revenge on the needs list?
No.
I will tell you something very interesting. As I explored this, because everything that you have guessed, except the revenge part, because that never entered in my field, but the fear and the anger and the frustration and the anxiety and the need for safety and the need for consideration, all that was true. But you know what I discovered bottom line from that as I continued to sit with it?
What about self-expression?
Self-expression, yes. Bottom line, I felt hurt because I had a need to matter. And I didn't realize that until I saw his car move 3 lanes over, hightail it down the line as if I didn't matter. So you see, that's how remarkable empathy can be. It helps to get to deeper levels. So I'm curious, we have a few minutes left before we go into another piece of information I want to share with you. But who would be willing to try empathy? Who would be willing to offer empathy? And who would be willing to receive empathy? And what we're going to do is give ourselves permission to be as messy as we want to be, because we've never done this. I'll be here to support you. But I would like for you, if you feel willing to do this, to give yourselves the opportunity to receive empathy and give empathy. So the person who would be receiving empathy will come in with whatever story or experience you feel comfortable sharing, and another person would offer you empathy. So do we have any volunteers? Something that you feel comfortable bringing into the room that you would like to explore in terms of feelings and needs? So I'm curious to know, do you see how I use that? What would be helpful to you to try this on? so that you have the experience of seeing what it's like. And it can be something as simple as, boy, I was really frustrated at the woman at the cash register at the supermarket. It could be something simple as that.
Okay, I will volunteer to receive empathy.
Okay, great. And then who would be willing to offer empathy?
Oh. Someone volunteered her husband. That's what we're laughing about. I thought y'all might enjoy the joke.
So who would be willing to offer empathy? And I'll be here to help you. You don't have to worry about getting it right or wrong. It's really about your offering yourselves the opportunity, the experience of doing this, so you see what it's like and what it feels like for you.
I feel apprehensive, but I would love to offer empathy.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate it. Wonderful.
Yay.
And I loved how you moved over so that the two of you can see one another. So now that you can see one another, the rest of us are here for support. And would you be willing to start wherever you want to start in empathy? And I will be here to help with this. And remember, mostly what you're doing is offering a safe presence when you offer empathy to the person who's receiving it. So go ahead and start wherever you want to start.
I forgot your name.
Alexandra, please remind me of yours.
Swayam,
Yeah.
And Swayam, remember, and your name, please?
Alexandra.
Alexandra. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so go ahead, Swayam. And would you two be willing maybe to speak a little, not real loudly, but loudly enough so we can hear you?
So, Alexandra, last night I had a hard time falling asleep. I was feeling frustrated, annoyed, restless, because I had a need to fall asleep, knowing that I had to get up reasonably early this morning to come to the center for the flowers and to set up the Zoom. And I tried everything I could. I was angry at myself because I knew that if I didn't fall asleep by a certain time, then I would have a hard time. But despite that, I chose to engage in my music practice, which always stimulates me. So I kept on doing that, and then I got to bed around, I don't know, 1:30 or 2, and I just could not fall asleep. So I turned the fan on and I did everything, and I just couldn't fall asleep. And I was anxious that I'm going to be tired all day today and that I would be able to get up and be here on time. I mean,
So we'll stop here for a moment. So Swayam is doing some beautiful work, isn't she, Alexandra? She's really naming her feelings and needs so beautifully. You just get to sit back and relax, don't you? But in the context of what she just now said, what would you guess her need was? And it's just a guess. And so you would ask her, so did you have a need for? And then we'll see what Swayam does with that.
All right, so did you have a need for rest and sleep?
Yes, I had a need to feel rested so that I could feel restored and rejuvenated in the morning.
So let's stop there. So Alexandra, you did beautiful work just then. You can't know if Swayam had a need for sleep or rest, but you can guess it. And did you notice how she responded to that? You see, now, if you had also said, well, did you have a need for ease? And Swayam said, no, not quite ease. It was rest. You still did beautiful work. Does that make sense? Because you helped guide Swayam through your question to what her need ultimately was. And that's as much time as we have for that. But I want to thank you both for your willingness to do this. And Alexandra, how was the experience for you? Well, let me check in first with Swayam. Swayam, how was the experience for you of receiving empathy from Alexandra? Did you have the sense that she was fully present to you, or was she making up a grocery store list in the back of her mind, or what was that like?
Yeah, she was listening and I felt relieved because I was able to express my feelings. I would have felt annoyed if she had interrupted and said, oh, we all go through that, or you could have done this, or, oh, it's okay. If she had interrupted, then I would have felt annoyed. But she listened and let me express. And that made me satisfied.
Thank you, Swayam. I appreciate that. I'm curious, Alexandra, how do you feel about what Swayam just shared?
I am. I'm feeling appreciative that Swayam was so aware of her needs and her feelings. It reduced my anxiety about being able to perform and find the words to respond to her correctly, or what I feel would be correctly.
So you're doing beautiful work now, being aware of your experience of offering empathy to Swayam and recognizing that your anxiety lowered because of her ability. And I really appreciate, Alexandra, your willingness to take a risk, to do something that you're not accustomed to doing, perhaps. And more than that, your willingness to offer a safe space, because that's how Swayam experienced that. And your willingness to hold whatever thoughts you may have in mind inside rather than share them with her so she can be free to explore. So I thank you both so much for your willingness to demonstrate that for the rest of us. And that's what empathy looks like, and that's what it sounds like. Now, I have one more piece of empathy I want to share with you. This comes from another book that Marshall wrote called Speak Peace in a World of Conflict. And it is just as remarkable a piece of work as it is when we offer empathy to others. And if you turn to page, let's see, 14 in your workshop materials, you will see at the beginning of that page, connecting compassionately with ourselves, a personal example. And so there may be times when we can't receive empathy from someone else. Maybe they're busy, or they're in a meeting, or tending to some other work. And we can, in the absence of that, offer empathy to ourselves. And this is just as rich and meaningful a work as it is receiving empathy from someone. And when I do this, I usually do it at my desk where it's quiet. I may even have paper and pencil in hand so that I can answer the series of questions that's here. So on page 14, I'm going to read this out loud so that we can do this together. And it may be interesting if you have something on your mind that you would enjoy having empathy on, matter how big or not big it is, you might think about that as we review these questions. So I'll start with the situation. I facilitate a spiritual group on Sunday mornings, and I'm aware in this one meeting that I want to end the meeting at 1 p.m. so that the group can meet with another group at Stone Mountain at 1:30 p.m. Everyone agrees with the strategy of ending at 1 p.m. Toward the end of our time together, one of our members brings up a powerful emotional experience that could take potentially more time than we have to discuss. I offer a head response rather than a heart response. I feel guilty about my response and wish I had not done that. So the first question is this: what is the judgment or the moralistic evaluation I make of myself when I've done something I wished I hadn't done? And in this case, I tell myself I'm wrong, or that I've done something wrong, that this is a bad thing I did. And this is often my favorite judgment of myself. I'm wrong, I'm bad, I've done something wrong, I am bad. So here's a very delicious question. Question number 2, what need of mine was not met by my behavior? And in this case, it was my need to be empathic with this individual. Third question, how do I feel? In this case, I feel sad and regretful. And then here comes another very delicious question. What need of mine was met by my behavior? To respect and support the needs and strategies of the two groups. To end the class at 1, so we can meet at Stone Mountain at 1:30. Next question, with these needs in mind, how could I have met all my needs? Well, when I felt the impulse to respond from my head, I could have connected with what I was feeling as well and have shared that with the individual. I could have said, when I consider we have 10 minutes left in our meeting, I'm aware of feeling anxiety over 2 needs. 1, to respect and support the plans previously made to get to Stone Mountain at 1:30, and 2, to respond to you empathically. Would you be willing to tell me how you feel about what I've just said? And then the last and final question, what did I learn from this? 3 things. 1, I can be effective when I connect to my feelings and needs before I respond. 2, it's okay to take the time to connect to my feelings and needs before I respond. And 3, I am too quick to offer solutions and strategies. And what makes this work powerful for me is the idea of needs, because I have been trained and educated and enculturated to feel guilt. And Marshall says guilt is one of the most useless feelings there are. So to translate guilt into needs, to get curious instead, well, what need was I meeting when I gave her a head response? That helps me literally take myself off the hook of guilt that I had put myself on and realize, wait, I'm not this awful, bad, wretched person that I'm telling myself I am. I was attempting to meet a need. And in this case, support the needs of the 2 groups. And so when I begin to look literally through the lens of needs, then I begin to learn something. I begin to see something. I begin to get curious, well, how could I do this differently the next time? And as I consider doing it differently the next time, then I can become more eager the next time something comes up, because I have an idea in mind now how to do that. And my hope for you, if you ever offer yourself empathy, is that you do this through the lens of needs. Because as Marshall said, all behavior is in the service of needs. There's no such thing as a good person or a bad person, or a right person or a wrong person. What there is are people attempting to get their needs met. And maybe they didn't meet them in ways that contributed to the well-being of everyone. Then rather than beat myself up over that, I can get curious instead. So what would be a better way to do this next time? And then if you take a look at page 15, you will see that it's simply the series of questions without the explanation. So if you ever wanted to offer yourself empathy, you can do that at your own pace, taking your own time to be curious, well, what were my needs and what were my feelings? And with that, this is how our workshop together ends. Having shared the first workshop discussing the 4 components of language of compassion, and then in this second one, empathy. So I'm curious, we have time. Do you have any questions or observations you want to make?
I have a question.
Yes.
What was the head response that you felt guilty about?
That I had said we have to end our meeting now.
Okay.
I didn't address what was really alive in her. Uma, you had a hand?
Yes, my previous question. I would like to be your input on that.
And Uma, we have 5 minutes, so if you can do
Yes.
quickly, that would be great.
Yes. So, in spite of spelling out your need before making comment, I understand from empathy point of view that you express yourself without blaming the other party. But despite that, if you receive not a congenial or empathetic response, what do? The other person overlooks.
Uma, I'm not quite sure I understand the question. I'll share this, maybe this will answer it. When my partner and I discover that we have a need for empathy, we will say to one another, I have a need for empathy. And we understand what that means. So that means he will share what's alive in him in the moment, and I will listen.
Right.
Does that address your question?
Yeah, ideally speaking.
Well, and you know what? This isn't necessarily a matter of ideals. It can be done. My partner and I do this. Others of you have done it. In fact, we've heard from Alexandra. Was that correct, Alexandra, when you were talking about you're using this material?
Definitely.
And so you see, it is a reality. It can be done. But I'll tell you what, it is really like doing two things at one time, undoing one thought system that many of us have been trained and educated and enculturated to do, to make someone wrong, to blame them, while simultaneously learning another thought system, which is what are the feelings and what are the needs? And I am here to tell you as proof it can be done. I'm also here to tell you as proof, for me, this is a lifelong journey. It's not like I'm going to be done by noon at Tuesday. I mean, I am by no means a finished product. I'm still, working through my own feelings and needs. But as I do this, I deepen my connection with others. And that's so valuable to me. It's meaningful to me. It's worth the effort. And for those of you who are interested in this material and would welcome the opportunity to practice it, I do offer practice groups. They are free. It is my joy to do this. And in practice groups, we apply what we learn. So we don't talk about language of compassion in practice groups. We do language of compassion in practice groups. And if any of you has any question about that, Elizabeth, would you be willing to give them my email address?
Of course.
Okay, great.
So, we could type it, you could type it on the chat.
Oh, all right, thank you.
If you're interested in doing that.
But it disappears after we turn off Zoom.
Okay,
So it might be best to put it.
but the people online might want to type.
All right, so here it is. So here's my name, Clarice L. Belcher, and here is my email address. Whoops. All right, so I'm going to send it. Did everyone see that? CLABEL33@bellsouth.net. And I will state I have 2 practice groups that are now available, and they're on Saturdays. One meets from 3 to 5, and the other one meets from 2 to 5, and they meet once a month. And
Can I say something, Clarice?
yes.
I've been in one of these groups.
I was just going to do a little promotion here.
As well as
It gives me pleasure to do that because I have a need to express how much I gained from one of these practice groups, and I'm.
I didn't mean to turn it over. I just
Yeah.
did, I was asking your permission if I could use your name as being in the group.
I'm happy to know that you're doing Saturday groups, because I would be interested in joining one of those.
Oh, wonderful. So email me, and as I said, they meet once a month. It's not always on the same Saturday. It's based on everyone's schedule. So we might meet the second Saturday one month. We might meet the third Saturday another month. And everyone who shows is just as interested as you are if you want the practice of using this in their lives. And just a quick note, I did not pay SWIAM to make that comment.
And I'm not done yet.
Go ahead. No, I'm ready, Elizabeth.
So what I wanted to say to people is that it's all well and good that we learn these techniques here with you in this amicable setting. But without that practice, I've been in the group for over 3 years, since before the pandemic. And Swayam and I were in a group together. And we meet once a month, and it has been in those groups when I bring something that I'm anxious about, that has upset me, that has hurt me, and those feelings just well up inside of me. It's the practice when I have those personal feelings, the practice over and over again that can begin to make a difference in our lives.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate it. I'm very touched, Swayam and Elizabeth, by your sharing your experience of the group. And if you are unable to join a group, I would suggest this if you want to. You know, they say it takes 30 days to create a habit. So if you take day one as the 30 days, you know, ask yourself, what do I feel and what do I need? Takes maybe 2-3 minutes at most. And if you do that every day, then you will begin to create the habit of connecting to your feelings and needs. And with that said, I am aware of our time. I want to thank each of you so much for all that you have asked and observed, your willingness to learn this very different language. And I appreciate what each one of you has contributed. And however you choose to spend the rest of your day, I hope it's in ways meaningful to you. Know that I love you. And if you're interested in the practice group, just go ahead and send it to me.
And we will close with our prayer for peace.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Naveen will lead us.
All right. Let there be peace in the outer space.
In the outer space.
Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace on the sky, the earth, and in the waters.
Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees.
Let there be
Herbs, the plants, and the trees.
May the gods be peaceful.
May the
Gods be peaceful.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
May the whole universe be pervaded by peace.
Let this infinite universal peace prevail throughout our beings.
Let this infinite universal peace prevail throughout our beings.
Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings.
Hari Om.
Thank you. Sorry, I don't know what happened here. Okay, thank you, guys.
Can I ask a question? I wanted to ask her.
Clarice, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear
Hold
you.
on a second. She's not on here anymore.
Is
Just
she-
can you give us 1 second?
I can hear you.
Trying to get it back to the
Oh,
no, she's
no,
not gone.
she's
I can see
here.
her over here.
are you on?
I'm
Okay.
telling you, I need to get back to the connection. Somehow it got off.
Oh,
So
just 1 minute.
just 1 minute. Someone has a question.
Okay, can you hear
Can you
me?
hear us?
I don't want to take her time.
Yes, no.
You can hear us. 1 second and you should be back on here, Clarice.
Can you hear me? Can
We
you
are
hear?
trying to get you back on
I
TV.
don't know what happened.
I can see you on computer, but you're not on TV. Well, maybe just.
Okay, here, you just asked the question, Lori. Lori, can you come up here and ask a question? I'm gonna fix that.
Can you hear me?
Clarice.
Hi, can you hear me? Yes,
She
can you hear me?
Hear you. I know.
Oh.
But
Same.
I have a question because of that. And I'm just wondering,
Hold on, hold on. Okay, now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Oh, great. We've got contact.
yeah, this is good, thanks. Would you mind repeating what Marshall said about guilt is one of the most,
Oh, and I'm not quite sure if he said that, but I have heard that said guilt is one of the most useless
useless?
feelings because it keeps us stuck.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
And we didn't want to take more of your time, but
Well, if you have more questions, say I'm devoted to this work. We've got an eternity if you
We're-
want.
are you talking to the group in
I'm
general?
talking to you, but
Oh, because other people might have more questions here if you want to hear them, but it's your time.
would you be willing to ask Elizabeth if she wants to check that out?
Okay.
Lauren, you can check it out with the group.
Would you all like to continue with questions or should we call a close to this?
Well, if you have time, I have a quick question.
I do.
And we probably have discussed this in our class, but I have a need to know again because I'm curious.
Oh, look at you. You speak this language so fluently, Swai. Our work here is done.
When we practice this language with someone who is not familiar with the language, and we get a sarcastic response when we guess a feeling. For example, if the person appears to be angry and frustrated, and I say, "Are you feeling frustrated?" and I get a sarcastic response saying, "Oh, what do you think? I'm happy," or something like that. How do I respond?
Well, you can do one of two things. One, you could guess what their need was, and the other is you could say, well, would you be willing to tell me how I might support you?
Okay. I think that answers my question.
Something is alive in them, isn't it? And so that would suggest an unmet need, right?
Right.
And so you could guess what their need is. So do you have a need to be heard? Do you have a need for connection? Do you have a need for peace? Do you have a need for ease? And you would just maybe guess it twice. Marshall said you wouldn't guess 21 times.
Right.
But guess it twice and they say no both times and just say, well, I'm curious to know what is alive in you in the moment or what is important to you in the moment.
Okay.
Because they haven't yet connected. Sarcasm is a form of anger. So they haven't yet connected to their anger. It's interesting when people scream and yell, everyone can hear them screaming and yelling, but they haven't yet connected to their anger. Isn't that interesting? Because when we connect to our anger, it's a quiet moment, not a loud one. Is that helpful, Swayam?
Yes, it is. Thank you. I'm very appreciative because it met my need to have an answer to that question.
Well, and it might be fun, like in a practice group, to do a role play,
Yes.
and see what that experience is like, to pursue that. Thank you, Swayam. I appreciate your asking the question.
Thank you.
May I jump in with a question as
Oh,
well?
please do. Yes.
It kind of ties into what Swayam was talking about as well. I found that in my initial attempts to implement some of these strategies, because I had an unhealthy communication dynamic with some people in my lives, they didn't trust the new communication style.
Right.
Right. But over the past few weeks, as I come to them over and over and over with the new style, they're like, this is how we're doing this now. And the other thing, I love what you said about, being responsible ultimately for meeting your own needs, for taking quiet time, for writing, because I have had to pull myself away. I've had to say, I have a need for safety. And, I gotta go take myself out of the room and spend some time collecting my thoughts. I'd love to reconnect with you. I'd love to revisit this topic when you're feeling in a better place, like when would be a good time for you to revisit this, and so that's been really helpful to me to feel at peace. And then also I've found, as this has progressed over the past few weeks, that you know, the person who I have a lot of conflict with is my partner, because we're so close and because we have, you know, had some of that maladaptive communication. Do you have any other suggestions or strategies for navigating that type of transition, I guess?
Yes, well, first of all, I just want to say to you, I admire and appreciate very much how well you have learned this and are using it. I mean, I'm tempted to say to you, our work here is done. I mean, that's just extraordinary.
No, I promise it's not.
I mean, that's extraordinary, beautiful work that you're doing. And sometimes, you know, this doesn't come from Marshall, it comes from something else called system-centered therapy. But when a system, and in this case, it would be you and your partner, that would be the system. When someone starts doing something differently, it can upset the system.
Yes.
Because they're used to the system functioning a certain way. And if the difference is too different for them to tolerate, they may shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really about you personally, it's about they're going into a place of fear. Because they may very well tell themselves this is dangerous. It isn't, but they sense danger because this is so different. You know, you're not being you the way you're supposed to be. You're showing up differently. I don't like that. But you know, what you could do if you wanted, and this is a very helpful strategy, is say, you know, the truth of the matter is I'm speaking this way because I really want a connection with you. And I'm hoping that this works. I really want to know what's alive in you. I really want to share what's alive in me. Would you be willing to tell me what you think about what I've just said?
I like that. Re-emphasizing the desire for connection.
Yes, and just because some people like that sounds so, you know, it's interesting, and I appreciate the opportunity to say this. Some people like, but it sounds so unnatural to say what I feel or what I need. And yet the way I think of it, it's unnatural not to share what I'm feeling or needing. But that's how we have been trained and educated and enculturated to speak. I'm not going there with my feelings. I'm not going to go there with my needs. I'm not going to expose myself in that way. And once they understand, I'm not going to make fun of the way you feel. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong with the way you feel. I'm just curious to know, how do you feel? And what is the need if they feel upset or angry or frustrated? What is the need? And then explore it together. And I'll end with this. I don't know if I brought this example in or not. And if I did, and you've heard it, just tell me to stop. I'm not interested in repeating myself. But Mason's two nephews were here several years ago, killing each other in the hallway. So we thought, well, we would support a different approach. So we brought them into the kitchen because we literally have our conversations at the kitchen table. And we went around the room and asked each one, how do they feel? And the youngest said this: I feel jealous because Thomas is the oldest and he gets more toys. And I mean to tell you, yes, exactly what you did. We were all so deeply touched by what he shared. And we had no idea that that was how he felt. And we thanked him for sharing what he felt. And his mother didn't say anything at the time, but when they went home, she started spending more time with him. And she's a wonderful mother. I'm not implying that she isn't, but she had learned something that she hadn't known before. And when they came back, they were much calmer. So, you know, when we create a safe place for people to share what's alive in them, then we can begin to connect and have the kind of connection that we all yearn for. You know?
Thank you so much, Clarice. This has been really wonderful. I appreciate the validation. I appreciate your further thoughts. I have a much greater sense of ease and contentment. And I really look forward to joining one of your groups, I hope, in the future.
Oh, wonderful. Well, please, you've got my name and email. So
yep, I got it. I found your website too. So thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. Well, I am rapturous. I feel rapturous.
Thank you. I've got to run. I got to go pick up my son. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Clarice, I know that you have a need to end this meeting, and I feel, I'm getting lost in the way. I feel regretful that I'm taking more of your time.
Please don't. You're not. I'm very happy. I want to reassure you, I'm very happy to answer any question you have.
I wanted to share this experience that sometimes it's the stories I tell myself in my head that this language is not going to work because the person who's listening is not used to this language and they're not going to be responsive, and I hold back. It is just a story I'm telling myself. And you have told us in class to either A, validate the story or use the language, and maybe it's just a story and you will get a good response from it. So I just had a need to share that.
Well, thank you, Swan. Yes, we're all wonderful storytellers, aren't we? Yeah. Yes.
I just want to share something. One of the frustration I find in life is when you were discussing this, in order to convey a message to another person may not be familiar with this kind of languages, but at the same time, you want to figure it out how you're going to put the message, and this person is receptive or not. And that's the biggest challenge about the time. Because if person is not receptive, you put the message out, they don't get it. Or they might misinterpret the message.
Well, I would suggest to you what I had just suggested to Alexandra, and just say, the reason I'm saying this to you is.
Can you speak a little louder?
Oh, can you hear me better now?
You need to go closer because the computer won't go louder.
Yeah.
I heard your question very well. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I would suggest to you what I had suggested to Alexandra, is to share with them, the truth of the matter is I just, want to have a connection with you. I'm genuinely interested in knowing what you think or feel. And it's important to realize that some people are terrified to share their feelings and needs because they think they'll be exposed into ridicule or judgment. And once they understand there is no judgment here, that all feelings count, all feelings matter, that all needs count, and all needs matter. Once they really believe that, they will feel more comfortable. But so many of us have been trained and educated and enculturated to not speak our feelings and to not share our needs. And maybe that was useful when we were children. Maybe that strategy was meeting our need for safety. But once people get, yes, this is a safe place, I'm genuinely interested in what you had to say, then you may find that they become more receptive.
Yeah.
It takes trust, doesn't it? It's trust.
It's trust and openness. Yeah.
Yes. Was that helpful to you?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, is there anything more? Again, I want to thank you all for your continued support. It is my joy to share this. And if you have any questions, Elizabeth will be willing to give you my email. I'd be happy to answer them. Alrighty, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Clarice.
Bye-bye.
Whoa, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Geeta, Uma.
Bye, Elizabeth.
Love you guys.
Love you too.
Oh, you can't see me. Here I am. Bye-bye.
Elizabeth, thank you for organizing this.
Yep. Thank you, Geeta. Yes.